Thank you. One guy's ready. All right. Yesterday we covered precision measuring. So everybody should be up to speed on measuring reading micrometers. A lot of you have already turned in lab your micrometer sheet. You guys are doing awesome, doing a great job. Many of you are already finishing up measuring a crankshaft, which is wonderful. If you're still working on project 1 and 2, you are falling behind rapidly. So I want to get that done. But today we're going to talk about hardware. Hardware is nuts and bolts and washers and things and screws. We're not going to cover everything, that is for sure. We're only going to cover a very small amount of hardware, just enough to get the basics down. And the reason why we want to do this now is because as you move into the program, depending on which class you enter, some of you may not start right away. You might go into engines, and some of you may start right away and go into electricity. You want to be at least skilled enough that you can enter the class without going, I don't even know how to bolt an engine together or put a nut and a washer on together. So you want to make sure you can do that the aviation way with the proper torque. So that is what we are going to cover today. And of course you have to be able to measure stuff, and that's what we were doing yesterday. So I am going to talk about part numbers and such. I don't expect you to remember part numbers of nuts and washers and things like that, but definitely when we do AN bolts, that will be something you will want to know. Now we are going to do hardware. Oh. Hardware. All right, so we are aircraft mechanics, and therefore, let me see. Oops, the hardware is 1, 2, 3. 3 hardware, and then hardware basics. Hardware basics. Should I just assume you're going to be late every day? Huh? Yes? We have to leave earlier. That's how that works. Because what happens is I start locking the door at 3:30, and then you get automatically dropped. All right. So an aircraft mechanic, well, we must be able to properly fasten items. Items with the correct hardware. Aircraft, well, this statement's already going to be somewhat false. Aircraft use aviation grade. Aviation grade, which is somewhat of saying approved hardware. And we never use hardware store items. Sort of is like my favorite statement, because you can just really change the world with that one. You must always sort of. Use it with my wife. I love you, sort of. No, I had to do that. Okay. If we go back not that long ago, that this number 2 is an absolutely true statement. Aircraft used aviation grade approved hardware. We never use hardware store we're not supposed to. Hardware store fasteners. So your legacy aircraft, Cessna, Piper, Boeing, I'll leave it at that kind of airplanes that are type certificated absolutely use the proper aircraft hardware. But then we have to look at this whole new breed of aircraft that have really become popular. These are your home built or light sport aircraft. I don't know, anybody familiar with Icon? They build them up, up here at Nut Tree, Vacaville. Yeah, I don't have a picture, but just gorgeous looking airplanes. So it's just an example of, it's a factory-built aircraft under light sport. Now, the FAA has really changed the way they used to do things. So if you wanted to build an airplane before, you went to FAR Part 23, and it had told you how to build standard category aircraft, and you had to build it by all these standards. Well, they've changed that now to where it's more aircraft manufacturer. You build an aircraft the way you think it should be built. Give us a call, and we'll come look at it. If it makes sense, then that's what works. And so these light sport have actually gone to SAE standards, Society of Automotive Engineers. So under that umbrella, there's all this engineering data, and they can use that for building these aircraft, which means that they're using SAE parts, which is to say that that's the bolts and nuts that are on cars. So if you're working on a Remos, which I never remember that name, I can't believe I remember it, which is a light sport. They have some over at Executive. They look like a flying egg. You seen them? Am I wrong about that? They're weird. They're weird. Flying. What's another light sport? There's Remos. The Pipistrel. Pipistrel's a good one. They're made in. They're Russian. They're Russian built. Polish. Okay. Eastern Bloc countries. But anyway, there's all these planes coming in. There, you can use hardware store stuff. You can literally go down to the hardware store and go, I just need that bolt. That's what came out of it. But when we're talking about your legacy aircraft, absolutely not. If I were to go to the hardware store and get a bolt for my airplane there, that is absolutely, you do not do that. Even if, well, our standard aircraft bolts, they're gold colored. It's I'll talk more about that, but it's a cadmium plating. And if I go down to Home Depot and I get a gold bolt that's CAD plated that looks like it came out of my aircraft, that's a grade 8 bolt. And most of the aircraft, our aircraft hardware is really like, I think it's grade 5 or 3. It's much lower grade and lower quality than what I could get at Lowe's. Go figure. But the difference being, our stuff has to go through tests to make sure that it's good. You could get a bad bolt out of, I don't want to pick on Home Depot or Lowe's, but hardware store. What's that?
Ace Hardware.
Ace Hard. Yeah. I like Ace. They have best stuff. So you really go if you want good hardware. Okay, so we want to make sure we're using the correct hardware for the aircraft. All right, let me see. Aircraft. So we are going to talk about aircraft hardware as though we're talking about, I call it legacy aircraft, but now you know what I'm talking about. Cessnas, Pipers, Beechcraft, that kind of airplane. Type certificated aircraft. Well, the other ones are type certificated. They're just light sport. Non-light sport. So aircraft is classified by a specific part number. So aircraft hardware is classified by a specific number, part number. We'll call it part number prefix. There we go. I like that better. Such as, they used to have, all our hardware was AN. It would start with an AN, like an AN 4-5, an AN 365, an AN 960, and I'm naming off all these different kind of parts. Like a bolt would be an AN 4-5, a nut would be an AN 365-428, or a washer would be an AN 960. So, and the AN, so that's how you knew it was an aircraft hardware. It started with AN, then it gave you the part number. And that stands for, and I don't care what anybody else says about this, is TAN stands for Army, Navy. Some books will say Air Force, Navy. As long as you get the Navy in there, that's the important point. But I believe this predates the Army. It would have been the Army Air Corps when this first came out. It doesn't matter. You have not had a test with me yet. I will tell you that I don't typically ask stupid test questions like, what does AN stand for? I don't really care if you know what AN stands for. You can be the best airplane mechanic in the world and not know what AN stands for, and I'm fine with that. I try to ask questions that are relevant. All right. We also have MS. Well, they had AN, and then they said, well, that's we can't have that because, you know, Coast Guard and Marines, well, they're feeling left out, and then they got pouty and stuff, and so we had to change things. I know I have a coastie in here somewhere. I don't have any Marines, right? Yeah, you're my coastie? All right. So they came up with MS, which is military specification. So some of our aircraft hardware kept the AN designation. Bolts just did. Standard bolts. There's a lot of different bolts. But just the standard old vanilla flavored aircraft bolt, they kept the AN designation. A lot of the other ones switched to an MS because there's different kinds of bolts. Nuts, for example, there was an AN 365 nut, and they're like, well, we can't just call it an MS 365 nut. We got to completely change it. And somebody said, well, just add a 20 on it. And then so they said, so it was an AN 365 is the same as an MS 365. I love that. That was fantastic. Just add a 20, and you already know. Now you know both of them. And then, I don't know, somebody came along, probably NASA, and said, well, wait a minute, you're leaving us out because we're not really the military. I could have made a bad Coast Guard joke there, but I choose not to. So we'll have NAS, which is National Aerospace Standards. And when they got together in their convention, they said, we can't just add like a 40 to something and, you know, make it simple. We have to change it so that nobody could even possibly comprehend what we're talking about. So like a washer that was like an AN 960 or an MS 2960 became like a 16 Charlie 21536 or something. Like, what the hell? So it's impossible to memorize those nearly. But as long as you have an AN, MS, or NAS designator, you know that you're talking about basic hardware. In the program, I guess maybe mostly because I'm old and I learned AN, I speak AN, a little bit of MS. I don't talk about NAS, and so I'm okay if you stick with me on that. You know, if you come up to me and you need, hey, I need an NAS, and you throw out the part, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, what is that? And you're like, it's a screw, dummy. I'm like, all right, I'll get it. All right, so most hardware is made of steel. There's a few things out there made with aluminum. You have to be careful to use those in the proper spot, but otherwise everything is steel. You can identify it by color. So we have, let's do the normal stuff is CAD plated. Let me spell it right, C-A-D-M-I-U-M. Cadmium. That's that stuff they think they make the Easter eggs out of, the cadmium Easter bunny eggs. Cadbury. That's what it is. CAD plated steel. So cadmium is a plating that goes on top of steel. It's a corrosion preventative. You can't just have plain steel out there. It'll corrode, rust. And so they CAD plate it, and then for whatever reason they choose gold. Back during the World War II era, in the 40s and a little bit beyond, they CAD plated it clear. And so that gave an appearance of this color right here. It was that if it was CAD clear, it would look just like that almost like stainless steel. I think the problem was stainless steel and clear CAD plating, it was very difficult to tell for some people, so they changed it to gold. Occasionally you'll still see clear. When I was building engines, I worked at a place where we built antique engines, and we tried to build them to the period accurate. And so we would actually have our hardware, we would strip off the CAD plating and send it out and have it CAD plated clear, so it'd come back brand new hardware that would match the period. But otherwise, you buy it now, it's gold. So CAD plated steel is gold in color. Gold in color. If the gold color wears off, then it becomes silver. But that's a whole other problem. And then we have stainless. Stainless is just steel that has a lot of nickel in it. Is stainless steel magnetic or non-magnetic? The answer is yes. So some stainless steel, there's, I believe, 4 types. I can only remember the 2 types, austenitic and martensitic. So austenitic style stainless steel apparently doesn't have enough iron in it to be magnetic unless it is red hot. If it's red hot, then it's magnetic. I don't know why. So stainless can be magnetic or non-magnetic, so you can't necessarily use a magnet to tell what it is. So stainless, which is obviously silver in color. You know, like that. So this is stainless. So it is silver. There's some other colors in there that we'll get into in another class. There's olive drab, which it's got another type of coating on it, which gives also kind of a blackish color to it. But we're just going to look at these right now. So a properly bolted item. A properly bolted item will, I think I'm going to add a few things to this. A, have the correct length bolt. Have the correct length bolt. When you go down to the hardware store and you want to buy a bolt, you know, if you want to buy a 1/4-inch bolt, I mean, they got them this long and this long and this long, and some have the threads go all the way up, and some have half the threads, and it's all different. Aircraft hardware is not that way. Standard AN bolts are not that way. They only come in one thread length, and that thread length is just enough to get a couple of washers and a nut on. The rest of it is all shank. So, correct length bolt, I'm going to add right here, must have at least one full thread past the nut. Just so I don't forget to say that later. So there we go. Use the correct washers. Use correct washers to prevent damage. To the part. Aircraft parts are stupid expensive. You do not, I should write this. Let me see. Never allow a steel bolt or nut to rotate against an aluminum part. Most aircraft parts are made out of aluminum or magnesium. Magnesium is even more brittle, or not brittle, softer than aluminum. So if we're going to bolt something together, you can't just put a bolt and a nut and turn the two together. That nut, the steel nut, will rotate into the aluminum part and damage the aluminum part. So we have to use washers. Yeah, so all this. Never place a lock washer against aluminum. There we go. Got that in there. No, somewhere here I got the picture I want. Let's see. I put it away. Oh, there it is. There we go. I'll come back around to this. But you see these two pieces right here that are reddish color are the aluminum part. And notice we have a bolt. And what is under the bolt? A washer to prevent that bolt from digging into that aluminum part. And underneath here we have a yellow piece is a washer. It's a regular flat washer. And then this has a lock washer that goes next and a nut. So we've met our requirements. Number one, the bolt and nut are not against the aluminum. And number two, the lock washer is not against the aluminum. All right. You are responsible for knowing that now. All right. Never do that. Never, never, never. Let me see. All right. And we are going to, I think I'll change this. We'll also have the rotated part safetied. Have the rotated part safetied. There we go. Have the rotated part safety. Let's go back. I should have kept my picture up there. Talk about it. All right. In this case, what is the rotated part? The nut. In standard practices, we hold the bolt and rotate the nut. So the rotated part is the nut. But what if this piece right here, had threads in it, and the bolt screwed into this bottom piece, and it didn't have a nut? Then what's the rotated part? The bolt is the rotated part. So we, under almost all circumstances, will have the rotated part safetied. There are exceptions to this rule, and it's usually a steel-on-steel part. Cylinders, when they're bolted on, are the only one I can think of right now that's an exception to that rule. But otherwise, they have the rotated part safetied. All right, and what do I mean by safetied? So we got to have some way, and I'm using this in a broad term, safetied. Safetied, that is to say, prevent rotation. So the way that we prevent rotation, the bolt from coming out, the nut from coming off, is one of several ways. So one, maybe we'll use a safety wire, which we'll talk about next, which is lock wire, stainless steel lock wire. We're actually going to lock the bolt to something. Or maybe we'll use a cotter pin, where we'll have a bolt that has a drilled shank and a castellated nut where a cotter pin goes through and it's bent over so it can't come apart. We may also use a self-locking nut. Self-locking nut, or possibly a lock washer. And those are all the ones I can think of off the top of my head right there. So we're always going to have one of those things unless it's the exception to the rule. So when you are bolting something together and you bring it to me and say, hey, check it out, I'm going to see, does it have safety wire, a cotter pin, self-locking nut, or a lock washer? And if it does have a lock washer, what goes between the part and the lock washer? A flat washer. If we have a self-locking nut, what goes between the nut and the part? Flat washer. Same with the cotter pin's going to use a castellated nut. So, all right. So that's general stuff. Let's talk about bolts specifically. Bolts. And like I said, we're just going to talk about the standard AN bolt in this class. So standard AN bolts. They come in many different flavors. One more. There we go. And I'll write this down in a second. They may be undrilled. This particular one, this one right here is undrilled. And what the drilling means is the shank. So this is the shank right here, and then we have the head. So the head and the shank. So undrilled. This one is undrilled. This one is drilled. They maybe have a drilled head for safety wire. This one has a drilled head for safety wire. Standard does not. What else do I have? Undrilled, drilled in the shank, drill in the head, and that's kind of the way they are. So there's every kind of combination of standard aircraft AN hardware right there, right? An AN bolt. So maybe undrilled. Maybe. Let's change this around. Let me see. There we go. May have shank drilled. Shank drilled for castellated nut. And cotter pin. Or it may have shank undrilled for self-locking nut or plain nut with lock washer. So either a self-locking nut or plain nut lock washer. May have head drilled for safety wire. Yeah.
What does that say on A, drilled for?
May have a shank drilled for castellated. CST. ELATED. Maybe there's two L's there. I don't know. All right. Let's talk about some of the nomenclature, which is the name of things. Nomenclature. Well, one of the things we have to know about is what is grip length. When we talk about riveting or bolting something together, we use a term called grip length. And the grip length, I got to put this other picture closer to where. Hang on here, I'm going to do just that. Stand by. I'm using this picture way too much. There we go. All right, grip length is the length of the material of these two pieces right here. So this is the, oh yeah, use red on red. That was wonderful. This is the grip right there. So the grip length of the material being bolted together. Does you follow? So change my color here. Grip length right here. This is the grip. The grip of the items being bolted together. Items being fastened. When you get into riveting stuff, you have to use a formula to figure out how long rivets are going to be, and that's something Phil's going to teach you. But the formula is has to do with the grip of the material being riveted together, which is to say, add up the material you're riveting together, that is the grip. So we can take that word and use that over with the bolt. So the grip length of a bolt, the grip length of the bolt is the unthreaded portion.
What does that say under D?
Nomenclature.
Nomenclature.
And is the grip length of the bolt is the unthreaded part. Because when we bolt things together, in theory, there should be no threads in this pink part right here. The threads should be all down here. Threads are down here outside of what we're bolting together, because all of the stress really gets stuck on the very last thread going in. And so if we have that stress of the thread also inside of where the parts may be trying to shear, then you can get into a problem. So you want the unthreaded part going all the way through the items that are being bolted together in a nice bolted item, which is to say that sometimes you get, the parts book will tell you exactly what bolt to use, and you go, well, I've got one a little bit shorter is going to work, I'll just use that. You don't do that. You use the one they tell you to use. All right, so grip length. And then this one right here. Nominal. The nominal length, that's a tough word, but what that means is it's like saying the average or what they were shooting for. So if I said that all Expo pens have a nominal width of 1/2 inch, it means that's about a 1/2 inch. If I used a micrometer, some are going to be a little bigger, some will be smaller, but they're all going to be right about 1/2 inch. So I say that with the length. If I say a bolt is a 1 inch 1 inch length, It's actually going to be 1 inch and some change, because they don't take every single little bolt and have some guy sitting on a stool with a grinder and a magnifying glass and a micrometer, and he's like, man, that's a little bit grind, and you're going to grind a little bit more, and checks the micrometer, perfect, and then, okay, that's 1 inch. It's like they make them in a machine, they make 1,000 at a time, and they make them 1 inch and a thread or two bigger, and that's just the way it works. So when you measure them, don't come up and go, well, I'm supposed to be a 1 inch, but it's like 1 1/16. Yeah, so that's what it's going to be, because they make them the right and a little bit longer. So, but the nominal length is length, length, not counting the head. And I guess I could add this while I'm on that subject. Nominal width. And I'll repeat this again in a second, but that's to say that the width is not an exact width. It's very close to it, but it's not the exact size. So let me see. Measured in 16ths. Of an inch. Okay, so it's going to be close to measured in 16th, but not quite. So how are we going to size bolts? And this is the big thing that you're going to be doing. So sizing bolts, which is how you get the part number. So standard, I'm just going to change that. And bolts. A and bolts are sized by length and width. The width is expressed in 16ths, or 1/16th, I said 1/16th inch increments. Which is to say, the smallest one we could have in an AM hardware is 3/16. That is pretty much the smallest. Smallest. They don't get any smaller than that. That is, this is an important point, also known as a number 10. I wish they wouldn't have done that, but they did, because screws go 4 common screws: number 4, number 6, number 8, number 10 screw. Guess what a number 10 screw is? It's 3/16. So, all right. Then the next one is going to be 4/16, also known as, which is AKA, also known as 1/4. Then the next one's going to be 5/16. Then the next one's going to be 6/16, also known as 3/8. Then we're going to have 7/16, and then 8/16, and 9/16, and 10/16, and on until we run out of 16ths. These don't get too big. All right, so the width is in 16ths of an inch. Everybody's got their calculator with them? Might need it. All right, the length is expressed in 1/8 inch increments. Well, you can't have an 1/8 inch bolt. You got to kind of start somewhere where there's enough room for it to have a nut on it. I think the smallest is maybe a 4. So it's a dash. So we'll say it's a dash. 4 would be 4/8. 4/8 is also 1/2. And then there'd be a dash 5, which would be 5/8. Then dash 6, which would be, come on, 6/8. Then there'd be a dash 7, which would be 7/8. Then there'd be a dash, no. Okay, once it gets to 7, then that's 7/8. What's the next eighth up? It's 1 inch. So it wouldn't be, it's actually less confusing. So then it goes to a dash 10, which is 1 inch, 0/8. Then it goes to an 11, which would be 1 inch and 1/8. And it goes to 12, which would be 1 inch and a quarter, 2/8. And on and on and on. I'm going to put dot, dot, dot. Then it will have, well, dash 13, dash 14, dash 15, 16, 17. Oh, we'll do 7. Then 17 will be 1 inch, 7/8. And the next one after 17 is a 20, which is 2 inch, 0/8. Not hard, right? So if you don't like the guy in the tool room or gal in the tool room, you go up and you're going to ask for an AN4-18, right? And they go, what? And they'll walk away and they'll come back, I just can't find any. That's how you take your break. All right. So if we put it together, the standard AN hardware would be an AN. This right here is going to be the width dash length. There we go. It's going to look like that. So first we have the AN. Then we have they call it series number, class, and diameter. So we have the diameter. I said width, diameter is the proper word. Material, which we'll discuss later, but a dash is standard. And then the length of the bolt, and then safety provision, which we'll cover in a minute. So what size bolt is this right here?
1/4 inch by 2.
So it's an AN4, so that's 4/16. And that's the width, the diameter. And the length is what? 2.0 inches. All right. For those of you who hate fractions, which is most people, let's talk about this 4/16. That's a 1/4 inch, right? Yeah. But you have to be able to reduce that down and know that it's a 1/4. It is so simple. How do you do it?
4 divided by 69 by 4.
Everybody got their calculator? Hang on here. I got to get something else up. This one. Here. Here. Here, there. There we go. Slideshow, current slide. Okay, this is your calculator. Texas Instruments doesn't make a interactive one, so I just have to do this. So we have this thing where we have 4/16, but 4/16 is not a proper, well, it's a reducible fraction. It's a proper fraction. It's just reducible. So we want to reduce it, and we know, because somebody's told us already, that equals 1/4 inch, right? There's a simple way to do that. We're going to type in 4, and then we're going to find this button right here. And I just call it ABC. It's ABC. So you're going to get 4 ABC 16. Do that on your calculator. So 4 ABC 16. And your display should look like 4,16. Everybody got that? In like 3 minutes from now, somebody's going to go, wait, what was that 4/16 thing again? So that's why I say, everybody got that? And that's your point to say, time to say, I didn't get it. Okay, that is saying 4/16. Now just hit equals.
Simple fraction.
And it changed it into 1/4 inch. Okay, I got to hear this. 1/4 inch, which now it reduced it all the way down. So if you want to change a fraction, you don't know how to make it from, you need to reduce it, That's how you do it. You can take this calculator in when you take your test with the FAA. So that's why I like this calculator. We'll learn how to use it. We're going to learn all of these tricks on math, and you're going to walk in, you get 100% on your FA math. So, and there's no reason why you shouldn't, because it's stuff like this. It's like they'll throw it at you and like, really? All I got to do is put ABC. Do you guys know about the ABC button? Because it makes my life easy. So anyway, that's how we reduce that fraction. There we go. So, oh wait, we're looking at this one. That one. All right. So we determined that this is a 1/4 inch by 2 inch, 2 inches long. I'm going to tell you right now, when we talk about torquing, the length does not matter. We'll get that later, but so many students are like, oh my God, I can't, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't, length doesn't matter, only the diameter. Okay, and then I'll write this down in a minute, but this bolt material, a dash equals CAD plated. A C equals corrosion resistant. Which is also called stainless steel. If it has a H, the head is drilled for the safety wire. So what happens if it's a, well, an H in place of a dash would be corrosion resistant. I'm sorry, let me do that again. So if I had an AN for Hotel 20 Alpha, that would be CAD plated drilled head. This is not on the test, but it will be someday. If I had an AN for Charlie 20, that is stainless steel. But what if I wanted a stainless steel and a drilled head? Maybe AN for Charlie Hotel 20. You put the C on the H.
So it just an H, you assumed it's just CAD plated. If it's a dash, there's just no head drill, but it's CAD plated also.
Yep. Not assumed. That's the fact.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Let me see.
Is there not for when the threads are drilled?
Oh, okay, so I haven't got that far yet, but yeah, apology accepted. Don't ever let it happen again. This back here, the A is the shank. It's either an A or a not A. So A is absent the hole. Absent the hole. A is absent the hole. That's how I remember it. And absent is spelled with a big A, a big B, and then a big S and a lowercase E and T. That's how you spell it. That was a joke, not a good one. All right, let's see how good we are. Let's see. So what would be an AN 4-6? What is that? That's where you tell me.
1/4 inch, 3/4 stainless steel.
Well, we can go the long version first. It's 4/16 by 6/8 long, right? The diameter. So what does that reduce down to?
1/4 by 1/4.
Which equals 1/4 inch by 6/8 is 3/4 of an inch long. If I'm not sure about that, I'm going to put 6 ABC 8 equals 3/4. All right, so 3/4. What about an AN 6-11? What is that? All right, so that is 6/16 by 1 inch and 1/8. And 6/16 happens to be 3/8 by 1.125. So I shouldn't do that. Just confuse people. 1 inch and 1/8. All right. What about let me see. AN 8-13.
Half inch by inch and 3/8.
Inch by inch and 3/8.
8
Or 16
sixteenths
Oh, half an inch.
by
13/8.
1 3/8. So 8/16 is how much? Half inch? So it's half inch by 1 3/8. AN 5-9. What's that?
Doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
Unicorn.
Why not?
Can't have a dash or dash 9.
Cannot have a -9. All right. So what about an AN 5-29? Still doesn't work. All right. So that doesn't make sense. You can't have a 9. There's no 9s. There's no 8s and no 9s. You can't have that. So nope, does not exist. How about an AN 5-22? What's the diameter?
Oh, 5/8.
Nope.
5/16.
5/16 by
2 inches.
2 inches and 2/8. All right. So now we got 2 inches, 2/8. You can actually reduce 2 inches and 2/8, even though you could just do 2 ABC 8 and you keep the 2. But you can go 2 ABC 2 ABC 8. So you're going to go 2 ABC 2 ABC 8, and your display is going to look like 2, 2, 8, which is telling you that that's 2 and 2/8. Hit the equals, and you will get 2 and 1/4. And I will warn you again, it is critical when I cover something. If you're sitting there going, I have no idea what he just said. Oh well, I'm sure I'll figure it out. Best of luck to you.
I understand it's 22, but I don't understand where like you do 2 ABC 2 and what is that?
Oh, in the calculator? So what I'm doing is, all right, so I'll slow down, and I like that. So we have 22 right there, which you know, I hope, is 2 and 2/8, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we know that the 2 would just, so we want to reduce it, or so we know that the 2 would just stay, correct? So we could just go, leave the 2 and go, well, I don't know what 2/8 is. And we can go 2 ABC 8 on here. And if we did 2 ABC 8 on here, it would tell us it's 1/4. What I'm telling you is that when you get a mixed number now, which we had 2 and 2/8, you can punch in that entire number in your calculator and let it spit out the entire number so that you're not splitting it up. And so on your calculator, you're doing 2 ABC. You know what I mean by ABC? It's this button. So you do that, 2 ABC. And then you get 2 ABC, which is this number here. So that's the 2 there. That's the 2 there. And then we have the 8 over here. 8 equals, and your calculator will tell you 2 and 1/4. So when you get into bigger numbers, mixed numbers, you can punch it all in at once, and sometimes that's easier for some people. All right, that brings us to 420.